Ashley Franco, ASHLEYFRANCO, Colorado Springs Fire Department Public Information Officer.
Okay. So what's the status update between like late last night and this morning?
Sure, so the fire sits at 640 acres right now. We have about 90% containment. We got the initial call yesterday at 4:17, started responding at 4:20. We arrived here at 4:25. And we had the bulk of the fire under control at 6:34 last night. So really what we want to do on these fires is make sure that we have a good perimeter around the fire. So you guys may have heard last night we said we secured a perimeter. That doesn't mean the fire is out. That just means that we have firefighters around the perimeter of the fire making sure that it's not spreading any further.
Okay, 90% containment. Did most of that happen overnight?
Most of the containment happened probably last night after 6-7 o'clock, but we had a really good handle on the fire yesterday. As most of you probably saw, the smoke started to dissipate, and that's really when we were comfortable saying that we could give us a secured perimeter.
Did this affect Peterson at all? I know it's on the other side of Marksheffel, but did you have any communications with the base? Were they keeping an eye on it?
So Peterson was here. Their firefighters were here helping us yesterday. To my knowledge, there was no impact to the base, but maybe that's a question for them. I can tell you that when we looked at the maps of this area, it is city property, or city land, city land.
Okay. What about how close did it get to the Springs Airport?
We kept it pretty far from the airport. We didn't have any flights impacted from what their public information officer has told me, and that's really what we wanted to make sure of, was that we weren't impacting any of those flights, delaying, canceling anything, and our crews did a really good job of keeping it, on this side, on the east side of Marksheffel.
Did it grow pretty fast? I mean, getting to over 600 acres.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were here yesterday with the conditions, you would have seen that maybe it wasn't as windy, in the city limit area, but when you come back to the east a little bit, it's a lot windier out here, and it was very warm yesterday. So we saw pretty rapid spread of the fire. When we got that initial call, our crews got here. They gave us that, initial first size up of what they're seeing, and almost immediately we asked for more resources from CSFD. And then when we kind of extended our resources to make sure that we were still covering the city, still covering the fire, that's when we reached out to our mutual aid partners from, our regional fire departments here.
What about that one abandoned building that burned? Can you tell us a little more about what that building was?
I believe it was some sort of barn, but this property is all leased or owned by a company out here, and when we talked to them, they just said it was just an abandoned barn.
Okay, so nothing of concern in the barn that would have burned, like animals?
Not that we were told of. We were told that it was just completely abandoned, no life, no anything inside of there that we know of.
Is it like no longer standing at all?
No longer standing, completely burned down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else more of note to that? I mean, an abandoned barn that burned, nothing else that we're missing?
No, that's the only structure I know that was impacted during this fire.
Okay, what was like the main, was there anything unique about like the challenges that firefighters encountered? Anything, whether it's the wind, working in the dark overnight, anything that made this firefight unique?
Sure. So the winds yesterday had shifted multiple different times, and that's kind of, what we're up against. Of course, we're paying attention to weather. We know today it's going to warm up a little bit. It's a little breezy out here today, but we are confident that our containment line will hold for right now. And yesterday what we were really up against was that wind shift. It was going to, it was shifting all sorts of different directions, and that's why we called in all those extra resources. We really wanted to make sure we could secure the perimeter around the fire, but with the wind, we can't control that. Fire can't control that. So that's really what we were doing, is getting our eyes above the fire. So obviously we had our drones up in the air, and they were giving us a good look at where we needed to put the resources. When the wind shifted, where did we need to move our resources? So really just following that wind shift.
Okay. Was it at any point, would you say, a concern how close it was to the Springs Airport? Like, hey, we really need to get behind this in the space that exists between the fire and the airport. Was that like a priority?
We obviously, of course, are going to make sure that the airport is safe in this situation, but because the winds were, mostly to the east yesterday, we didn't have a huge concern about it since, Marksheffel is right there. It hadn't jumped the road. It really stayed on the east side of the road, so we were pretty confident that our containment line on the east side of Marksheffel, like right where the road hits, was pretty solid.
Do you know how many firefighters worked on this altogether?
I don't know how many from the other agencies, but I can tell you that we had about 40 CSFD personnel here, 21 units from CSFD, probably another 15 from our surrounding agencies.
I was talking about perimeter versus containment, because that's tricky terminology.
Absolutely.
For everybody. What's the difference between a perimeter and containment?
Sure. So a perimeter is us just getting crews around the fire. So we're making sure that on the outsides of the fire, we have firefighters ahead of the fire, ahead of that fire line, if that makes sense. And then the containment is really going to be that we are confident that the lines that we have around the fire's not going to spread anymore. So we may have some spot fires within the bulk of the middle of the fire, but we know that our containment lines will hold so that the fire does not spread any further outside of the containment lines. Does that make sense? Okay.
So original reports were 4 smaller fires. Were those along Marksheffel? Do we think it was traffic along the road that might have started it?
So our fire investigators are on scene now working to determine that cause and origin, or the origin and cause, excuse me. But what we do know is we did get reports early on of 3 to 4 starts. So we were seeing, 3 to 4 fires, and when our crews got here, those fires had already kind of combined into one. So not sure what had happened. It did start along the side of the road from what we could gather, but obviously our investigators are out here and they'll determine the origin and cause of that fire.
Does that speak to how dry it is?
Absolutely. I mean, you guys can see from just being out here, anytime you pick up any of these, brush grasses that are so dry and you kind of grab them in your hand and they just crinkle and fall apart, that really shows the moisture that we don't have. So obviously, we're going to look at the weather. We're going to see, what is in store for us. But we are very dry out here. And obviously on the east side, we have a lot of grasses. We have a lot of brush. And that's really what's going to go off. And that's kind of what fueled this fire a lot yesterday. The winds, as well as the dry area that we have.
And then did it actually start down closer to Drennan?
Yes, it did start down closer to Drennan, and then it moved probably northeast is kind of what we were seeing from the drone footage. Yes, so most of the fires that we see, most of the wildfires, most of the brush fires that we see, one of the number one causes of these fires are humans. And that's really what we want to get out to our community is you can stop them. You can help us stop those fires. So we want you to be very diligent. Yesterday, we had high winds, we had higher temperatures. Just because we're not under a red flag warning, just because we're not in burn restrictions or a burn ban, does not mean we want you to let your guard down. Because we know that we're in a city that has the potential to have a bigger fire. We've seen it before, and what we really want our community to understand is they can help us. So that's why our responsibility, our tagline at the Colorado Springs Fire Department is sharing the responsibility, because we want our community to help us out with those kind of things.
Looking at what today has in store as far as the forecast, sitting at 90% containment going into today, what do you expect today to be like as far as efforts to get it completely contained?
Sure. So we want our community to understand that don't be surprised if you see, some very light smoke around here. We have a brush crew on scene, a brush truck on scene, as well as our drones on scene, basically giving us an overhead view of this fire to see where the hot spots are. But we want the community to understand you may see a little bit of smoke. We've gotten several calls this morning about it. But we're pretty confident that our containment lines will hold for the day and hope to have, full containment by the end of the day.
So you're not expecting any major winds that would cause a potentially worsening scenario rather than it getting better?
So we don't expect anything from the Marksheffel fire to grow bigger. So if there was, a grass fire, a new start outside of that could be a different story, but we don't expect anything from this particular fire to grow.
Speaking of the illusion of how many days ago we had some snow, and then there's possible snow in the forecast for this weekend. That it seems quite common in our area that we have fires right before snow or rain. Is that true?
So I guess from what I can say, obviously I'm not a weather expert, I'm not a meteorologist, but from what I can say, when we have these weather events, when we have a bigger storm coming in, whether it be rain or snow in our instance, we do see a lot of those winds picking up. That's generally when we get our red flag warning days. We see the winds pick up, we see it hot, we see it dry, and then we get that cool down. So we do see that a lot, and obviously we want to make sure that our community is paying attention to that too, is understanding that we live in Colorado, we live in a drier climate, and though we do get some of those nice storms and snow that we see, we are always at risk. 365 days a year we have our wildfire season, so we want the community to really pay attention to the weather, pay attention to our local news agencies, pay attention to the fire department, and that messaging that we're trying to share with you guys.
I have a little bit of a different question.
Sure.
About this, I think it was last year sometime, don't ask me exactly how many months ago, there was that event at the Cimarron Hills Fire Department for like a new approach to like the region tackling wildfires. Was that implemented on this?
Yes, so the Pikes Peak Strike Team, they're made up of regional partners who every single day we have them on standby for the event of a fire like this. And we absolutely stood those up yesterday. But we kind of went above and beyond that yesterday. We needed more resources. So we had the initial response, and then we were calling out to our partners, Black Forest, Cimarron Hills, Falcon, Peterson. We had Cheyenne Mountain. We had a number of our regional partners out here, but that's absolutely how it starts. So if we start that team, they get here and we need a little bit more resources, we'll go ahead and call for them.
So far, the use of that strike team model, still several months into that, is this a good example of how that was effective compared to the old approach?
Absolutely. This is a great example of being able to put that team into place. And what really happened before was it took a long time to get everyone staffed up, making sure, okay, we need this brush truck staffed, we need this brush truck staffed, and then we need an incident commander or fire chief or battalion chief to be on that team. Now we have a set schedule. So every day we're saying, for instance, Monument, you're on call, Black Forest, you're on call, and CSFD, you're on call. And so now we have that schedule that as soon as something like this happens, we can call them up and they can respond. So it's just a very quick approach to it.
How long did it take for the first crews to respond yesterday, that response time?
So we got our initial call at 4:17, and we were responding at 4:20, and then we arrived at 4:25. And what we really want to make the community aware of is that this is different than a structure fire. So it's different than getting on an apparatus and going to a structure fire. We have to get in our wildland gear. We have to make sure that we have everything for a wildland fire. So it takes just a little bit of extra time, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. But our crews got here fairly quickly, and as soon as they got here and saw the smoke that the whole community was seeing, they called for extra resources.
Was it CSFD that first arrived?
Yes, Engine 25, so our newest fire station that's down in Colorado Center, they were the first ones on scene. I'm just going to add a few things. We got a lot of questions yesterday about an Everbridge notification going out. We did have Everbridge, a notification going out from Peak Alerts, and that was to the surrounding area here just to notify the community. But we want to stress that you have to sign up for those alerts in order to get them. They're not just going to come to your phone. We want people to go to peakalerts.org, sign up, and then you'll be notified if you're in the area. So if you were driving along Marksheffel, you may have gotten a notification if you were in this area. If you were at the airport, you may have gotten a notification. But that's really important, is to sign up at peakalerts.org. The other thing, I have to give a shout out to our drone operators here. They were nonstop flying yesterday, and that really gives our incident commander, our battalion chiefs here, an overhead view of the fire. So if it is spreading rapidly like it was, we can send resources quicker than if we were to just be ground level and be able to see that fire. So really fantastic tool for our fire department, and we hope that our community understands the impact that tool has on our department and how it helps us get to those fires and get our resources where they need to go.
I follow up on that. So because it was shifting, did it add to the safety measure that they may have been thinking they're working to the side, and then it shifts, and then suddenly flames are going to them? It's getting to the right place, but getting out of the wrong place.
Absolutely. So kind of what we do, the setup that we have is we have a pretty large monitor that we can show our incident commander on scene. And when there's a lot of smoke in the air, it's kind of hard to tell where the fire is going, where the actual flames are going. But because we have the infrared technology, the thermal technology, we can really pinpoint where are the flames moving, and that helps us as a safety precaution as well. So if the wind shifts and if the fire moves, if we need to get our crews out of the way, we will. If we need to get our crews in a different place, we will. And that's really helpful to our incident commanders to keep our people safe, all the crews on scene safe, and then help to extinguish that fire. Good?